when you think about the men who have occupied the office of President of the United States, your mind probably first goes to some of the greats, men like George Washington, or Thomas Jefferson, or Abraham Lincoln, or Teddy Roosevelt, or maybe even Woodrow Wilson. I'm actually just joking about the last one. I only threw that in to make Chris from Vlogging Through History fall out of his chair. But anyway, you would be excused for thinking of some of the men who are considered the greats first. But what about some of the presidents who really aren't considered to be some of our greatest? Men like James Buchanan. Is there anything that we can learn from men like that as well? Well, today I'm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and we are at the home of James Buchanan. So again, the home that we are standing in front of right now is the home of our 15th president, James Buchanan. It's better known as Wheatland. And right off the bat, we might as well acknowledge the elephant in the room. Americans like to rank things, so that goes with our presidents too. So we like to know who's the greatest and who's considered the least among them. James Buchanan typically comes in last, or very close to last. But I think there are some things that we can learn about, both from him and from the era that he becomes president in, that is valuable. So imagine it being 1856, and James Buchanan is standing right here on this porch, and you are among some of the crowd out here listening to him give his speech. As we're standing here in front of Wheatland, a few things I want to point out about James Buchanan. One, he has the distinction of being our only bachelor president. He never married, although he was engaged at one point, and there's different stories about what happened with his fiancée. Her father apparently didn't want them to marry, and she may have died of some disease, or some stories say that she committed suicide because she was grief-stricken. Anyway, Buchanan never married, and he served in a lot of different roles in government, but in 1856, he decided to run for president. He was a Democrat. As a matter of fact, James Buchanan is one of two presidents to have been a native of Pennsylvania, the other one being Joe Biden. And it seems odd to us in this day and age that, a president wouldn't travel the country during the campaign. We think of him today going on the campaign trail and going to different cities. Well, James Buchanan wasn't doing any of that, and that wasn't uncommon. He ran his entire campaign from this porch right here. So people would come and stand in the exact spot where we are standing right now and listen to him give campaign speeches. And this was a very chaotic time. The Civil War hadn't started yet in 1856, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't still violence. Kansas and Missouri were just insane during this period of time. It was kind of like a civil war before the Civil War. So you had that going on. When he is elected and is inaugurated, you're going to have the Dred Scott decision come down. John Brown's raid is going to happen during his presidency, and then the secession crisis. So this is a man who is going to be president when things are really falling apart in this country. All right, we're going to take a look around at a few other things and then go inside. All right, moved over to the back side of the house, and before we go in, I wanted to show this building right here. So no home tour is complete without a look at the bathroom or the bathroom facilities. So this building was built in 1829, and it's pretty interesting. If we look in here, you can see that the bathrooms here were kind of a family affair. Looks like we have 5 holes here. Got a couple for adults, and then there's one medium size that I'm guessing is for an adolescent. And then there on the far end, here you can see 2 that for children or exceptionally short people. But yeah, thought that was interesting. All right, so we just got into the front door here at Wheatland, and we're just going to take a little walk through the house. By no means we're going to be able to see everything, but we'll show as much as we can in the time that we have. So if you would have been a guest of James Buchanan in the 1800s, well, this room right here is where you would have been received. This is one of the front parlor rooms. And we have a newspaper account from a reporter who visited Wheatland, and he really does a good job of describing in depth the different rooms of the house. So if we walk in here, well, above the fireplace, well, here is a portrait of James Buchanan. His nephew said that he very rarely was seen outside of any formal attire. So here you can see kind of the characteristic look that James Buchanan had with the high collar, very nice shirt. The family says that in this portrait he's holding a copy of the Constitution, but that's debatable. But if we look around, I mentioned the newspaper reporter. Well, here is an artist's depiction of what this room would have looked like. Okay, so here's the fireplace over here, and then of course you have a couch and some other things where guests can be received. And one of the things that I'll point out in here that I found fascinating is this gaming table. And here you could play any number of different games, but there was one game that could be played between men and women where you would ask different questions and then the women would give an answer. And it was supposed to, kind of be a little bit goofy in a way. Like here the question is, would you have hot tea with me? And the other one, the response is only in morning clothes and veil. So anyway, it was designed to just be something a little bit fun. Now, one thing that I want to point out in this home that I think is just extremely fascinating is that in this home, 47%, so almost 50% of the furnishings in this home are original. So when you walk into Wheatland, you are really walking into a time capsule.
The Wheatlands, as it was known by its original owner, Mr. Jenkins, was a farm that was organized in 1828, which is the age of the house. The house was actually, construction started in January and was complete in October of 1828, which was pretty fast, even by today's standards for a house this size. It's about 13,000 square feet. James Buchanan was good friends with the Jenkins family and probably saw Wheatland going up. Little did he know that in 1848 he would be negotiating the purchase of this farm, which he bought for $6,750, roughly equivalent to just a little over $300,000 in today's money. And James Buchanan bought it for cash. He paid $3,000 down in December of 1848 and paid it off a couple of weeks later in January of 1849. And Buchanan was a little busy in Washington at the time. He was the Secretary of State for the United States under President Polk, and he wrote home to his niece Harriet sometime in early spring and said that he was hoping that by sometime in April of 1849 that they could all, as a little family, move into the Wheatland farm mansion. We know that they were here certainly by the 25th or 28th of the month of April that year. So Old Buck didn't get necessarily to celebrate his birthday on the 23rd here, but he was certainly finished with his work in Washington by March 4th or 5th, when Zachary Taylor took over the presidency and Mr. Polk retired. So James Buchanan moved in here with his little family, which consisted of two blood relatives, Harriet Lane, who had just completed her studies at the female seminary, the Catholic school for girls, run by the convent of the Visitation Nuns in Georgetown, Maryland. And he also had a nephew who was a ward, just like Harriet, and his name was James Buchanan Henry. Buchanan had been raising James Henry since James was orphaned at the age of 7.
All right, we're leaving the front parlor now and entering into this room here that would have been a little bit more of a private space for Buchanan. This is another one of the sitting rooms here. And there are just books everywhere and a few other things that I'm going to show. Now, when you look at Buchanan, we look at him through modern eyes, not through 1856 eyes. Keep in mind, this man was popular. He was elected president of the United States. On paper, highly, highly qualified. He had been in the Senate and House at a state level, Senate and House on a federal level. He had been the minister to Great Britain and to Russia. He had served as Secretary of State. So this is a guy that had all of the qualifications of serving as President of the United States. But he was going to be up against some very difficult circumstances in the United States at the time. I want to show a few things here in this room, though. Take a look at this. This is a desk that actually belonged to James Buchanan, and man, it is ornate. It is made from teak wood, and I mentioned that James Buchanan was a minister to Great Britain and also to Russia. As a foreign diplomat, James Buchanan was good. He really excelled in that position. During his time as minister to Russia, he orchestrated some negotiations with Tsar Nicholas, who was a notoriously difficult person to work with, that really helped advance the interest of the United States. It was a 3-year position. He basically accomplished his job in 2 years and then spent the third traveling. Well, one of the places that he went was India, and made a lot of contacts there, people who admired him. And when he became president, well, this desk, which again is made of teak wood, was gifted to him. Now, we don't know the name of the gifter, but we know that it came out of Calcutta, India. Very, very amazing. A few other things that I want to show out of this room. Again, I'm just amazed at all of the original pieces and original artifacts that they have out on display here in this home, which really immerses you in the experience. This is a book that obviously belonged to James Buchanan. We can see his name on there. This is a book that talked about the different American Indian tribes that were in the North American continent, or on the North American continent. Also in this room, we have some original furniture. This was arranged by his niece Harriet. So James Buchanan was our only bachelor president. So his niece kind of served as the first lady to James Buchanan, and orchestrated parties and things like that. She had traveled with him when he was a foreign diplomat. Take a look at this. This is really something else to me. So in his travels, he had met Queen Victoria and also her husband Albert. These are 2 lithographs that were sent to James Buchanan. And here's what is really amazing to me. These aren't copies. These are the originals. And both are signed by Queen Victoria and by Albert. Simply amazing that they have this here. All right, we're moving now into the part of the house that served as the dining room for James Buchanan, and a few things that I want to point out here. So this table that we are looking at looks kind of small, but could be expanded out to seat 18 people. And if you look at the china, so this is the actual original china that James Buchanan had here in the house that he got from the minister to France. And if we go over here, you can see, the larger collection of it. And you might look at it and by today's standards look at it and say, oh, pink. That's kind of an interesting color. Not, maybe something more associated as being more of an effeminate color. But during this period of time, well, what we are looking at here, the color was called Parisian pink, and it was very rare. Was difficult to reproduce, it was actually only produced in Paris. And if you had something in Parisian pink, well, what you were signaling to your guests is that you were a person of means and of wealth. So anyway, pretty neat to see this china here in the dining room. And one other thing that I really found fascinating, if we walk over here, Buchanan was a man who liked fine drinks and fine wines. This is an original bottle of wine that belonged to James Buchanan. Okay, I've moved back out into the foyer area, and a few things that I wanted to point out here. So right here we have a portrait of James Buchanan, and his nephew said that of all of the portraits that were made of his uncle, this one was probably the most accurate, the most close to his likeness. Now, we don't know exactly how tall James Buchanan was, but there's an old sketch of him standing next to Abraham Lincoln at the inauguration of Lincoln, and he's it looks to be just a few inches shorter. So he was maybe between 6'2". And then over here on the other side, like many other presidents, George Washington was a favorite of James Buchanan. So here you can see a portrait of Washington. And then as we move back here, one thing that I wanted to show was this bust of James Buchanan. So this was made from a life mask that was done on Buchanan at the time, and is now right here in the home. Okay, I have one more room that we're going to look at here on the lower level, and that is the library. All right, walking now into the library here at Wheatland, and oh my gosh, I love books. Buchanan also liked books. He was a lawyer, and I have to say, I am jealous of this room. Holy smokes. I don't know why, but I am really fond of this room. This is my favorite room that I've been in so far. So like I said, James Buchanan was a lawyer. He revered the law and had this thought that all of America's problems would be fixed if we just followed the law, which I can agree to that to some extent. But really the problems at the time and some of the fracturization, if that's even a word, that we had in the United States went beyond that. So a few things that I'll point out here. I mentioned the newspaper reporter who had visited Buchanan's Wheatland before. Let me see if I can get a good angle on this. Here's an artist depiction of the library here. And a few things that I'll point out. This desk was a gift from his niece Harriet when he was elected president. So the chairs and the desk are exactly the chairs and desk that we see in this picture. And again, kind of re-emphasizing the fact that Buchanan was our only bachelor president. When he became president, Harriet became kind of like his de facto first lady. So something else here that's kind of interesting is here in this picture. We see this ship. This was a revenue cutter named the Harriet Lane, named after Buchanan's niece. Incidentally, this is the first ship that was named after the woman who would really occupy the First Lady position. Later in the Civil War, it was converted to a warship. All right, so we got a tour that's coming through, so we're going to go upstairs right now to the second level. And something that's pretty interesting, so Buchanans like to live nice. If you look at this hand railing here, well, this is made of rosewood, and the spindles are made of tiger stripe maple, and there are 101 of them. So, yeah, the Buchanans definitely like to live nice. Moving now into the east bedroom here in the house, and as I mentioned earlier, almost half of the furnishings in this house are original. So what we're looking at here is a bed that Harriet had made. Now, it wasn't originally here in the house. It was her home down around Baltimore, but she had it made for James Buchanan, and as you can see, it's pretty low to the ground. Well, this is because, as he was advancing in age, James Buchanan suffered from gout, and anyway, this bed would be easier for him to get out of. And if you look here, well, this is the desk that belonged to Harriet, and you can see that it is just carved with an incredible amount of detail. This would have been in the house after the death of James Buchanan. He probably would not have tolerated something so, ornate or extravagant in the house. But it has remained in the house throughout its entire history, since it was put in here. Moving over to the west side of the second floor, and after the death of James Buchanan, Harriet decided to make some improvements to the home, which included some indoor plumbing. Now, again, this is a wealthy family, so this is something that would have not been common. But here, and I love how this looks, we have this zinc-lined tub, and also a bidet. And over here in the corner, it's thought that this is where the toilet would have been. Now, here at the Wheatland house, they have a bookcase in here to kind of interpret how they think that this would have been another library that James Buchanan would have had. And then again, I've mentioned a couple of times how many original pieces of furniture and artifacts they have in here. Something else this room could have been used for was to store luggage for the guests. So here we're looking at some original trunks that belonged to Harriet and her husband. Moving into the next room, this is the space that would have served as the bedroom for Harriet. So a few interesting things here. One is this prayer bench, and if we take a little bit of a closer look here, I'm not going to touch it, but this is a prayer book that actually belonged to Harriet. And while she was in the White House with James Buchanan, Harriet had an admirer who decided to make this doll for her that was made in her likeness. So this is real human hair. The head is made from beeswax and was, of course, moldable to where the person who made it could fashion it in such a way that it looked like Harriet. And if you hold up a picture next to it, you can definitely see the likeness. And then he even had so much attention to detail that he had these fake flowers made, which were white roses, which also happened to be her favorite flower. Yeah, but this was Harriet's bedroom. Okay, moving now into the bedroom of James Buchanan, and there are a few things in here that I found interesting anyway. One of them being this bathtub right here. Now, when they were manufactured and advertised in the 1800s, they were called a hat tub because it obviously looks like an upside down hat. But the way this would work is you would stand in this tub, and you can see a little soap dish there, and soap yourself down and pour water, over your head and over your body. You maybe do this, once a week, and then you could stand in this tub. And of course, you can see that it slopes down to catch the water, and you don't get the floor wet. Now, this wouldn't have been in the bedroom. This more likely would have been in the kitchen. And something else that was interesting in this room that, I don't know, is different by today's standards is this right here. This is called a nighttime commode. So you can see it's just a regular chair, but has this lid on the seat. Now, underneath of this seat, you would have had a couple of boards that would have had like runners there that you could slide a lead or zinc, like a chamber pot, to where if in the middle of the night you had to go to the bathroom, well, you don't want to necessarily have to go outside in the dark. Well, you can do your business right here in the bedroom, which seems kind of nasty. The only thing worse is having the job of the chambermaid, who would have to empty it out the next day. As we've already mentioned, James Buchanan is elected in 1856, and you can go online and see a bunch of before and after pictures of presidents to see just how the stress of the job wears on them. Well, here is a picture of James Buchanan at the end of his term, and you can see how the stress of being the leader of this country during such a tumultuous time took its toll on him. And right here in this bed, on June 1st of 1868, well, James Buchanan drew his last breath. He'd had a lot of health complications due to drinking some bad water from the National Hotel in Washington, D.C. Prior to his presidency. And then that opened him up for, basically weakened his immune system. He had a bunch of respiratory problems. But right here is the deathbed of James Buchanan. All right, we've got another place that we're going to get to here in just a second, but holy smokes. If you were ever in the area of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, come to this place. Forget all the stuff about Buchanan being ranked as one of the worst presidents in U.S. history. That was really, really interesting, and I didn't even show a fraction of what is in that house. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and hop in the vehicle and head to the final resting place of James Buchanan. We've moved just a few miles down the road from Wheatland and are now at Woodward Hill Cemetery, which is the final resting place of James Buchanan. And there was something that I forgot to mention about Buchanan that I meant to say earlier, and that is, as you can see on this little marker here, he was also a veteran of the War of 1812. Now, I don't think that he saw combat, but was in a reserve unit, but served nonetheless. And if we look here, it says, "Here rest the remains of James Buchanan, 15th President of the United States, born in Franklin County, Pennsylvania, April 23rd, 1791. That makes Buchanan the last president to have been born in the 1700s, and also the last president to have been born when George Washington was in office, and then died at Wheatland June 1st, 1868. And he was surrounded by his family at his deathbed, including his niece, who was holding his hand, and he was slipping in and out of consciousness. And he came awake and uttered his final words. He uttered, "O Lord Almighty, as Thou wilt," and then slipped back into unconsciousness, and then again died on June 1st of 1868. But right here is the final resting place of James Buchanan. After James Buchanan left office, he was widely condemned for his performance as President of the United States. He had done a great job as a diplomat and as Secretary of State, and all these things, but those skills that he had in those roles did not translate well to the presidency. Maybe his greatest strength was also his greatest weakness in trying to just make everybody happy. And in trying to make everybody happy, he made nobody happy. And under his watch, this country is going to fall apart. Now, Buchanan said in his later years that history would vindicate him, but that hasn't really turned out to be the case. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things that we can't learn from James Buchanan. He's just as worthy of studying as any of the other presidents. So I've got this goofy goal where I've been trying to visit all of the presidential graves. I've been to Washington's grave and Kennedy and Taft and a whole number of others, Polk, Benjamin Harrison, and now can check off James Buchanan. So you can go to the playlist here on this channel where you can see some of the other presidential sites that I've been to. But anyway, for now, we're off to the next place. Want to see some of the other presidential sites that we've been to? Then click on this playlist right here. Also, be sure to subscribe to catch all of the new content when it comes out.